So hello everyone, welcome to Satsang. Let's make some silence first so that others can join. Quiet down your mind. Stop the free flow of thoughts. Hold it tight. Don't allow any disturbances. Keep the focus. Okay. Each generation of seekers face different challenges according to predominant circumstances. In previous times, when information was not so much available as it is today, the big difficulty was to get that information. Not as much to get quality information, because spiritual teachings were transmitted from master to disciple, so it was preserved more or less. These days, there's a lot of information going around, all types of information. So getting the information is not the biggest, the most difficult thing. And if previously the absence of information was one of the biggest obstacles, these days it is disinformation. Spirituality tends to be treated as something which is a margin of society. Like spiritual seekers, they are just a little small segment of society. They don't count it as much, and they tend to look at it as something apart from society. And as it is observed by some, this disinformation going in every spheres of life, either in personal relationships, politics, whatever is there, disinformation is being used and creating a lot of confusion. Well, spirituality is not as different, because it is seen, especially in the West, as something which is more or less apart from society, it is something which is not very important in the terms of society. But this is completely wrong, because in whatever sphere of existence, of sphere of life, spirituality is the highest fields of all. And you can tend to see how spirituality as a whole is by observing society and its values. The kind of life that people are level and at a global level, what kind of experiences are possible. More light is predominant, sattva is predominant, high vibrations predominant, less suffering. The values of fraternity, love, compassion, they tend to increase, and the opposite values tend to decrease, and vice versa. And this was known in ancient societies, spiritual-based societies, like India, for example. And this is one of the reasons why worldly people used to support spiritual people, spiritual places, because in a way they know that whatever they would support, it would be good for them, not just personally also, but globally. But all those knowledges, more or less, have been losing its power. And these forces concur with each other constantly, but in different ways. See, light is available. It is there, present. Darkness imposes itself, seduces, manipulates, bullies. Whatever technique works, light is there, available, present. So if you look at the world and observe it, whatever you are seeing in your level of understanding reflects the intensity of the spiritual fire, like a big fire, which is the sum total of the individual fires. The more truth seekers there are, the more vibration gets higher. The less seekers there are, the lower the vibration. Real spiritual seekers, the worse the human experience, more suffering. It's not worse because it still gives an opportunity for spiritual seekers. For others, more or less, it's just suffering, in a sense. So those of you, seekers of truth, that find yourselves being pushed aside from society, you're not really being pushed aside from society. You are being brought to the main field, to that which is the most important aspect of the world. This is where things really matter. And it's not a social movement. But why is this important? It is important because of the beginning of the subject, which is disinformation. And like I said previously, you see, delusion, ignorance tends to prevail, fights to prevail, to prosper. And disinformation at all levels is there. And in the spiritual environment, it is at its highest. This is why usually I always tend to point for seekers to observe how it was in the past, what is in the scriptures, in the Puranas, so that they can get a glimpse of what it was and compare with what it is today. As a whole, seekers of truth, they are more aware of certain aspects, but completely unaware and unprepared in fundamental aspects. Everybody has gone directly to college. Nobody's attending kindergarten. And without kindergarten, it doesn't go anywhere. So all these practices, the science behind traditions, it's being classified as not important, not needed for now. Everybody knows is beyond all of that. But in reality, it's just empty. Some can tune a little bit, but there's no flame for the majority of seekers. And the flame, the presence, because the spiritual process, there is a life in it, that it takes you. It's like, let's use the example of a flame. When your process finally becomes alive, it's like you're inside of a flame. No, I'm not using the example of the flame because of the heat, not yet. It comes also. But the flame, the movement, the upward movement, that upward presence. So in the spiritual process, starts, becomes alive. It's like you're taken in a flame. There's a flame which is present. A vibration, a higher vibration that makes even your body becomes more elevated. You feel its presence. It is there. It is working actively. And you have to take care not to disrespect that. To cherish it. To protect it. Especially from yourself. And in that presence, or with that presence, guidance is there, directing you. Sometimes that flame becomes really a flame, an intense flame, and it changes, but it continues there. If the flame is not there, there's nothing there. So, if a seeker is doing a little bit of practice or non-practice, and there's no flame, there's no fire, that presence is not there. So we will think that that is normal. That is the process. It is like this. So what is left besides a mental game? Nothing. It is as it is. So the beginning is difficult. But if things are going in the right direction, if you are working hard, if you're sincere, that fire will arise, that flame, that presence, that elevating presence. Like you're being taken by that flame. You feel it. It is a part of you now, but still different. That will be there. Guidance will be there. If there's no flame and there's no guidance, then... Or you're still at the stage where you're still struggling with that lower nature. Because that lower nature is the fuel. As you worked it, it is the fuel for that flame to arise. So arriving to that flame is one part. Keeping it, honoring it is another. And this is why the beginning is very important. Kindergarten is very important. Because if the right motivations are not there, if humility and surrender and devotion are not there, and for this to be here, a lot of impurities have to be worked out. Then when the fire comes, you'll be still full of greed, twisting that divine call, favoring your delusion, favoring that character. Instead of a seeker of truth, you're just a king looking for a kingdom. And you'll disrespect that flame, that divine presence. And then for it to come back again, it is much, 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 much more difficult. So in the old days, there was a tradition of different types of spiritual disciplines that are disappearing. In places like India, you can still find it. But here, especially in the West, it tends to disappear. Of course, they are still there a little bit, but for the majority of seekers, they are going around this. It's like going around the daily training of running and still aspiring for the marathon. When the day of the marathon arrives, they are unprepared, unsuitable. So people tend to say that today there is much more information, that the ancient sacred teachings are available very easily. They are, if you can look for them, if you have the eyes to see. And they are still as difficult to find as they were when there was no information available. So only the one who has achieved a little bit of purity can distinguish one thing from the other. And it doesn't matter if you're looking at something which is a real teaching or not. Your eyes won't be able to see it. And in fact, for those who are looking in the right place, it is as easy as it always have been, more or less. When you focus in that call for liberation, when you focus in your spiritual process, when you focus on making yourself fit for guidance, working as hard as you can with what you have, meditating intensely, trying to work out your selfishness and all those traits that you already know that are unsuitable. That intensity, that commitment, that is what opens the doors. And without it, doors won't open. Or if they open because of destiny, for example, you will not be able to move further because you will twist everything, you will disrespect, and then you'll fall down where you were, or even worse. There is a confusion which is made throughout all the times. There's a confusion about freedom and liberation and what is called paradise in certain cultures, or the highest spheres, and they are completely different. So the character, the spiritual seeker, the character, the illusion, is always seeking for a paradise. Freedom is something else. So the other day, I made a text, I don't know if it was the other day or whatever, that was talked about this tradition of when the spiritual quest began. There was initiation, and that seeker would tend to wander about, roaming around, begging for his food, not having a place to stay. He couldn't stay long, and with that, he would remain more or less 2 years, at least as I know. And he would work, for example, on his attachments of everything. It was a very deep experience for a seeker of truth. And I made that text not suggesting that people roam around and whatever, but to show the depth of the commitment, the science behind it. And the immediate reaction is to defend. There's no need to let go anything. Usually these who are saying this, they haven't observed to these traditions, because if you observe them and observe yourself, it doesn't matter if you have to do this or that, because whatever needs to be done, this is guidance which will point. But you can evaluate. You can imagine yourself turning your backs into everything and roaming around. And if this is a serious observation, a sincere one, you will see all fears arising in there. And the only way that something like this wasn't beneficial was if there was no fear arising. If you had no problems in just turning your back into everything, just go. If any difficulty arises, then this is an issue, and it is an important issue. That doesn't mean that you have to start roaming around, but it means that this needs to be worked, and worked in the sense that it has to be. And this is guidance that determines. Not personal will, not your ideas what's best or worst, because this is the difference. A seeker of truth follows guidance. A seeker of well-being follows his own ideas. And it doesn't matter if you have two seekers, for example, and they are listening to a master. One is a seeker of truth, the other is a seeker of well-being, still working his way to become a seeker of truth. So one is trying to understand guidance. What does that really mean? He questions and questions to see exactly what is the meaning of that, what is being asked, directed. The other one is interpreting the words according to his own ideas of what's right and wrong, adapting that to his vision of paradise and using it in that sense. Different motivations, different reactions. The flame, the presence of the real process, guidance, that's what leads the do's and don'ts. Philosophies are dead, more or less. They are just tools for that flame to be ignited. So the seeker of truth is always trying to be more open, more receptive, more surrendered. Trying to tune with guidance, to listen to it, and to have the strength to follow it, to honor it. He knows that what is right now will not be right in the next moment. He doesn't have to understand guidance, just follow it. Have the stamina to follow it. Because guidance is very, very challenging. The most challenging. Not in the vision of paradise, of course. In paradise, the vision of the seeker of well-being, it's like guidance is like a super butler or something like that. That is there to accommodate this very important person and take it to the highest and the best and whatever. Real guidance in a real process is very, very challenging, the most challenging of all. It has very sweet moments, yes, of course, but nobody has any problems with the sweetness. Kindergarten brings the sincerity, the humility, the devotion, the purity, the strength, and the surrender. And they are much of a need. They are fundamental aspects. So a seeker of well-being, for example, when he listens to a teaching like this of roaming around, he says, no, but there's this example and that example, this 2, 3, 4 examples of those who didn't and they succeed. And that may be right. It is right. Everything is right. But is it right for you? It would be much more profitable and mature for you to observe that instead of defending something that is just defending your attachments and fears and fragilities. It would be much more useful to observe your fragilities, to observe that need to defend them. You would be much more aware of the work that needs to be done. And preparing yourself, because eventually you will have to go through something. Those attachments have to be broken. And you can do something on your own, yes, of course. Initiative is very good. But your time is much more useful, dedicated to awaken that process, to intensify your practices, your prayers for guidance, to make yourself worthy of guidance, not demanding guidance. These ideas are very confused, but to be worthy of guidance. And these days, it is being presented as, oh, that is something of the past. But that past never was so needed as today. And when you see at the level of society, the level of disinformation that is going around, you may be certain that in spiritual terms, it is 1,000-fold. Everybody is honest, whatever that means. But as a seeker of truth, if you want to have a chance, there is work to be done. And the more you commit, the more sincerely and hard you work now, the more you will increase your chances. Because prepared or unprepared, everybody gets their chance. Sometimes you get the chance, you don't even see it. Maybe there, standing in front of you, and you won't see it. And you will say, oh, I didn't get a chance. But you did. Sometimes you see it, and you cannot honor it long enough so that transformation occurs. If you're a seeker of truth, if you believe to be a seeker of truth, and that flame is not present, that vibration that takes you, that you understand that it's life, that it is alive, your process. And if guidance is not there, well, that is a big message. And you can continue defending these ideas, these new ideas. And the majority of them, it is like in other specters, it is disinformation. But it is a nice one because it is something you want to believe, or at least a part of you wants to. So when your life is committed to your process of freedom 24/7, then you have a chance. It's not going to be easy, but there is a chance. And I'm talking about freedom. And in the absence of guidance, of that flame, well, you know that work has to be done. There is a lot to do. And what you can hold on to is look back, look at the traditions. Look, for example, specifically, what is a seeker of truth? What is a disciple? It's the same. What are the qualities that are present? Then you have a direction. And in the process of establishing those qualities, if you are working hard, it doesn't matter the level of how do you say this? It doesn't matter how bad you are, how far you are from that. If you're sincere and working hard, that presence and that flame may arise. When it does, honor it. So, all teachings, all philosophies, not the twisted aspects of them, they suit different seekers with different needs. But they are like the matches to start your own fire by the intensity of your thirst, of your sincerity and dedication. And then it is up to guidance, not up to philosophies. And if you're not completely ready when guidance comes, you will struggle to understand guidance instead of struggling to surrender to it. Okay. So it's enough for today. Next satsang will be Sunday, 9 o'clock in the morning, Brazilian time, UTC -3. Till then, observe, evaluate, intensify, make it real for you.